what's happening now with Laura. Every day it's just a special day. Every day is something new. Every day is more of the same. Oxymoronic, isn't it? Absolutely. Before I go into my usual preamble, I want to say a special thank you to a police officer. Many times police officers come under the gun where we're concerned. We bash them when they exhibit the slightest bit of misjudgment. We come down hard on them when it seems that they're not doing their jobs. But how many times do we observe police officers exercising prudence and commending them for it? Today I had a little incident. Ever so often, every single one of us, even those who try to pretend that they're holier than thou, they don't step on an ant or anything like that. Even those of us, the most pious of us, we break the law sometimes. Well, today I was driving and I wanted to collect something from someone on the opposite side of the road. When I looked around, there was no parking, and so I didn't want to go park at a distance and have to walk back just to spend 2 seconds. So I looked around and I noticed there were no vehicles coming, and I crossed the road. I was driving, mind you. So I found myself on the opposite side of the road. After having conducted my business, I realized, I'm not having any luck. So I thought, let me just bend the rules a little bit and to park badly, because I'm only going to be stepping away from my vehicle for 2 seconds max. And guess what? Lo and behold, vehicles started coming from both sides of the road, and I found myself in a precarious situation where I was almost, not quite, hindering the flow of traffic. Well, the thing with almost is that it doesn't count, because you can never account for bad drivers or drivers who are not as expert as you would like to think that you are. And so I caused a little bit of a mayhem. And there was this police officer who came. And the manner in which he dealt with the situation was no less than commendable. Wasn't upset. As a matter of fact, he tried to calm me down. And to calm down, those persons who've never driven a day in their life except in the passenger side, the passenger seat drivers, who had every comment to make on the situation, paid them no mind and dealt with the subject matter, in this case myself, at hand. And I must commend him for that. He could have done so many other things. He could have ticketed me. He could have spoken very sternly or harshly, because he did speak sternly. But I appreciate the manner in which he dealt with the situation. And for those of you who are thinking, no, he did not know who I was. And that was refreshing. Because I absolutely loathe when people feel that they must do me a favor because they recognize me from television. No, you don't have to do that. You just need to be yourself. And so to this officer, I didn't take the time to get your name or your number. I want to thank you for the way that you handled the situation. Having said that, the speed with which this officer got there was no less than amazing. I don't think anybody called him. However, those ATVs that we often see the police officers drive during carnival season or during those mass events? There was this officer coming, riding one of those, and being there, assessing a situation, hopping off that vehicle and dealing with it to allow the free flow of traffic. Bravo. And for that, I say, this is a prime example of why we need those types of vehicles within the city limits. It is easy to maneuver. You can go off-road while you can go on-road. You can get there within seconds of an incident. if you're patrolling properly and there are sufficient of them around. So I want the mayor of Castries, the police commissioner, and the Minister for Internal Affairs to look into that matter and to ensure that the police are equipped with more of those ATVs. Because to my mind, they really are a useful resource. They came in quite handy today, and I applaud the officer for being around at the time and handling the situation as he did. Now, speaking of vehicles, we will all remember, because it's still fresh in our minds, the sad moment when the news hit the airwaves of the 2 young lives lost over the weekend. It brought me straight back to the 2 young girls a few years ago lost their lives. Not too very far from where these 2 young men lost their lives. And I will tell you something, St. Lucia. This weekend was not very good for motorists. And coming to studio, though I have driven the roads up and down all of yesterday and even for a good part of today, coming into studio, something just went down my spine. And it took me, a drive that usually takes me about 5 minutes, took me a good 10 to 15 minutes. Simply because it had rained in my neck of the woods a little bit. And because I had found out who one of the young boys, who his father is. And he's a good family friend. We haven't seen him for a while, but, you know, friendship like that, you don't just dismiss just because you haven't seen each other in years. And I really, really felt touched. And you know, it's just like you think 2 young lives, 18 and 19, just snuffed out just like that. And to know that you know the parent of one, and, you know, just so many things that we take for granted. And I want to make this special appeal right now to young drivers in particular. And I say young drivers in particular because older drivers make just as silly blunders as young drivers. But in particular the young ones, because you don't have yet under your belt the years of experience that will come to the fore in an emergency, in a moment of folly. I want to urge you to not bow down to peer pressure. To think before you act, look before you leap. I do not know the details of this accident, but it may very well be that it could have been avoidable. I want you to think very carefully when you traverse our roads, your roads, to be careful. Exercise due caution. Which reminds me, a young driver getting his license or her license for the very first time gets what is called a provisional license. And I've always said, these provisional licenses are granted to new drivers, giving them a year's window within which to complete the defensive course. To my mind, the defensive course that we implement in St. Lucia is hardly a defensive course. I believe that the defensive course should not be taught in a classroom setting, in a sit-down lecture setting, because we get all of that before we are able to pass the exam. That's why you take driving lessons. Your instructor would have gone through all of that. You doing the theory, you going through that, and yet still we are put through that 1 year. Am I saying that the defensive course is useless? Not at all. I am saying that it ought not to have been in a classroom setting. It ought to be a practical program. Because you could say anything in a classroom. You can hear anything in the classroom. But do we practice what we are taught? You know, on the weekend, I had the opportunity to sit in a technical session for singers. And one of the things that the mentors were saying to those young singers is that they've got to practice. Practice makes permanent rather than practice makes perfect. Because there's no situation that will ever be perfect. What we may think is perfect today may not be perfect tomorrow. However, if we put in the backs of our minds, or even in the foreground of our minds, that practice makes permanent, and we practice that, we put it into effect, then what you have is good habits become something of a second nature to us. So if we practice good habits all the time, not just when someone is watching, or because someone expects it of us, or because we want to pass an exam, but if we continue to practice those good habits day in and day out in every facet of our lives, they become permanent, they become a fixture, and it becomes second nature. So I want to implore to all drivers, but in particular young drivers, practice good driving habits, because those will become a permanent fixture in your driving career. Now, there are a number of videos passing around these days, and I want to touch a little bit later on. I'll touch a little bit on the one of last week, where we saw the young child, to my mind, being raped, because as far as I know, she's under the age of 16, and to have those sex acts perpetrated on her, or to have her involved in those sex acts, is tantamount to rape. And we know what rape is. It's not always the tearing of your clothes and ripping of your hair and fighting for your life. It is as long as somebody says no. It also includes those people who aren't in a position to say no. Those children who are under the age of 16, who do not have the powers of consent over their own bodies. That too is considered rape. And so when we get these videos and we pass them on and we spread them and we share them with the world, we are raping the victims of these videos over and over and over and over. Now let's just say this young woman, this young girl, not woman, this young girl was penetrated. And when I say penetrate, I'm trying to be, because I know that there are a lot of young kids watching, and I know some parents, we want to be the hypocritical beings that we are and think that our kids don't know about sex and they don't know the acts of it and the different things. You're being a hypocrite because they know, and perhaps they know even more than you. So let's say that she had vaginal sex. That's as clinical as it gets. Let's just say she had vaginal sex, and let's just say she had gotten pregnant. Let's also say that her parents wanted to have nothing to do with her because they didn't believe her story that she was forced or coerced. Maybe they put her out. Maybe she had this child. Maybe she moved on and found a paramour, someone who will take care of her, supposedly. And then she gets pregnant for a second time, all before she turns 16. Are you saying do you think that she would be adequately equipped to handle motherhood at that age? That she would be adequately equipped to have, to bear those children, to mother them, to nurture them? Over the weekend, we got the clips of President Trump saying that women are allowed to carry children at 9 months, and that is wrong. It's obvious he made a blunder. I highly doubt that, in spite of the president being who he is, making the statements that he makes, would actually go to an anti-abortion rally and make those kinds of statements and mean them. I think it really was a blunder. He put his foot in it. But right here in St. Lucia, and so the Americans and the world have taken his context, his words out of context, and made a mockery out of them. But right here in St. Lucia, we do the same thing. You would recall that our own Prime Minister made a statement sometime last week on another talk show, talking about something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing here, to the effect of taking children away from mothers who are ill-equipped. And we've made a big deal out of it. And we've blown it to my mind, out of proportion. And I say out of proportion because there are government agencies put in place specifically for that purpose, to remove children from homes that are deemed untenable, unsafe, inappropriate for the well-being of children. We have numerous NGOs in St. Lucia operating on that very premise. So where do we get off? Because we dislike the Prime Minister, twisting everything he says, and in this particular incident, twisting his words to make it seem as if he is an unfeeling brute. I will be the first person to say that I hold no brief for the Prime Minister. I'm not being paid to defend the Prime Minister. I do not have to defend the Prime Minister. I have given the Prime Minister his own stick when I think he deserves it. But in this case, I think we are being hypocritical a bit much when we say that the Prime Minister is being insensitive. But is he really? Aren't we continuously, almost on a daily basis, asking for more funding, more resources for those government organizations that are put in place specifically for that reason? You know, it is very clear that a child of a teenage mother often entails numerous risks. We're talking about things like low birth weight. We're talking about complications for the mother during pregnancy and delivery. We're talking about health problems associated with poor prenatal outcomes. We're talking about greater risks for perinatal birth, death. We're talking about even after birth. We're talking about lower IQs. Excuse me. There are so many complications, challenges facing children of parents who themselves are children. The socio-economical problems. We have so many fatal accidents that could occur because a child who is still not yet cognizant of danger, raising a child, even for the most prepared parents, raising a healthy and happy child is one of life's greatest challenges. So why? Why would we want, because it is said, and I quite agree, a child's place is with her parents or his parents. Loving, caring parents who can afford. I'm not saying that poor people ought not to have children or that they cannot raise children, but there must be some sort of financial capabilities to be able to raise children, in particular today's situation, today's environment. We're not saying that poor people cannot raise children because money is just one factor, but it is a significant factor. And experts will prove that. Just listen to this. Having the ability to check off commonly accepted parenting prerequisites, a quality education, a good job, mental and emotional stability, a safe home, can make the challenge easier to tackle and overcome. Unfortunately, adolescents who become parents often have a shortage of key life skills and other resources that are vital to the parenting process. This sad reality is supported by research showing that, on average, children who are born to teen parents are less likely to ever reach their full potential. And the effects of teenage pregnancy on parent, baby, and community can be devastating. Those are not my words. Those words I am reading from How Adolescent Parenting Affects Children, Families, and Communities, an article I found online written in 2014, February 27th, 2014. You can go online and you can Google it and you can find it for yourself. It makes for some interesting read. And there are a slew of articles very much like this one, detailing why it should not be that teenagers be parents raising children. And it goes on and on to talk about mental incapabilities, for want of a better phrase, that these babies have as a result of being born to teenage mothers. When a baby is born to a teenage mother, he or she is likely to have more difficulty acquiring cognitive and language skills, as well as social and emotional skills like self-control and self-confidence. These abilities are already developing in infancy, and they are essential for school readiness. So you see the domino effect? When children are raising children, we raise children who have cognitive skills. So they are less likely to cope in school. That means we have to sink more resources into caring and educating these children with the cognitive disabilities. There's enough research to prove that, generally speaking, age brings maturity, self-assuredness, knowledge, and experience. By the age of 21, one has typically graduated from high school and is pursuing post-secondary education or participating in the workforce, or both. As a teenage mother, that possibility or probability is cut short. And though there are numerous cases of teenage mothers who have risen to the challenge and risen above the odds and raised healthy, well-adjusted children, at what cost? And to whom? Most likely, most often, to the teenage mother. So she sacrifices a quality of life for herself to be able to raise a child. And the probability of her being good at it and rising above the odds slants to the other side. We're due for a break. When we come back, my guest. with Laura. I am your host, Laura Sheppy, and tonight with me is the almost brand new, I would say, um, administrative attaché to the Prime Minister. He is no stranger to us in St. Lucia. His name is Mr. Norbert Williams, and he took his post effective October, October of last year, October 1st of last year. And as I said in the preamble before we went to break, there have been a number of cases where a prime minister have made statements and we've taken it, we've blown it out of proportion, we've said different things. But the last one really touched me to the core because anybody who watches this show knows how much I love children and I care about their welfare and their well-being. And just because a person births a child does not make that person the most nurturing and most adequate person to raise that child. And so when the Prime Minister made the statement that he made last week, it resonated with me because I saw beyond just the words of what he was saying. Now we have that clip lined up. So before we go on to my guests, let's just play it so we refresh our memories of what the Prime Minister said.
Okay, not even an adult yet.
And that person goes out and has their first child and you help them, okay? And you help support that first child and goes out and have a second child. Should that person be entitled to keep that second child?
So what you do, you force her to abort the child?
No, not abortion. You must be crazy. I would never support abortion. But they could adopt the child, okay? Unless a parent or another family member can show they're going to take care of the child.
But wouldn't you be infringing on the rights of that child, that young lady, as a mother?
But is that person not infringing on your rights? That they're bringing up a child that they can't take care of?
But it's not a straightforward issue.
And I know
then
that, but
maybe what the state
but-
should do
but-
is
but-
to assist the young lady in raising that child.
Okay,
the second
but
child.
it's
no?
a conversation, right? Okay, but do you agree that allowing it to continue the way we're doing it is not working?
Clearly.
Would you agree with that?
There's need to address it.
We need
but
to-
I don't know.
Okay, I'm not prescribing anything.
Yeah.
I'm just saying to you that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. We can't just keep pretending that it's not there. Okay? But guess what? People need to sit down, address it, and come up with recommendations. And I can say to you, more than likely, whatever the outcome is going to be, there's going to be people who are not happy with it. But the problem is that how do we stop it from happening? Because that would be the best way.
But don't you think
How
that,
do we
that
educate-
issue? Yes, you're making this point, but don't you think that issue will be politicized as well?
Absolutely, but doesn't mean that you have to run away from it. Okay? Because you're asking me to solve crime. All right? And that is one of the ingredients of crime, is when kids are left by themselves and are not given proper guidance, don't grow up with proper values. That's not to say, and in any way to be taken, that some single mothers don't do an amazing job. And you can see that the responsibility they take. And I've met some of them who've had that first child, and they don't have the second child until they get properly married and have a way of taking care of that child. It's almost like a wake-up call. But there are also some other younger women, right, that maybe don't have that fortitude, and then meet another guy and will come convinced that he's going to take her. Then she has a child with him. I mean, I've met several of them that under the age of 18 have had 3 children. By the time they're 22, they've had 4 children. And the mother is the same way. And in some cases, the grandmother is in the same way. So they're all living in the same house. So we as a society must deal with that and find a way that we're going to deal with it.
What do you think about that? I mean, I don't see anything wrong in what the Prime Minister is saying. The Prime Minister is not saying carte blanche that we're going to take every mother, every woman, and do a one-child policy like China. He's saying those people who are unable, because we're already doing it. And I think that's what the Prime Minister missed out on saying, is that the state is already doing it. What he's talking about is giving the mother a fighting chance. A fighting chance to make something of herself. There are numerous women who are unable to bear children behind. We hear it all the time. They're barren. Could they not adopt? Could we not take the burden off of the state and to allow for these children to be adopted? We're not saying extricate the children from the parents. But could there not be a medium that could work, that could help the mother have a second lease in life, and to help that child have a first lease in life.
Well, Laura, thank you for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to be here, and good evening to your viewers. Laura, it is very clear from so many of the statements out there that there are on twisting and turning everything that our current Prime Minister says. It is clear that the social services in St. Lucia conduct these very same house visits to determine whether a parent or a household is fit for a child to be raised within. Every day we hear of incidents of abuse, whether sexual, whether physical, and other issues with children, and there is a hue and cry from the public for social services to step in and remove children from those circumstances. What the Prime Minister alluded to is young parents, usually teenage girls, who are ill-equipped physically, psychologically, and financially to raise children. And if they continue to become a burden on the state, it is logical, it is sensible for the well-being of the mother and the well-being of the children, so that they can all become productive members of society, if there is some intervention. And as the Prime Minister said, he is not prescribing anything at this point, but there has to be a discussion in St. Lucia. And this is what has happened now. We're discussing it here, and it's a discussion on social media, it's a discussion on the talk shows in St. Lucia, and this is what we need to have.
Absolutely. I mean, just the mere thought of just taking this out of context and just blowing it up. Now, this one thing that Timothy said when the Prime Minister was explaining his position, he said, or don't you run the risk of politicizing it, of the topic, the issue at hand being politicized? And I say, what's wrong with that? Because a lot of the times people confuse or they misconstrue politicizing an issue as if it's supposed to be taboo, as if it should not be a political issue. I think it ought to be a political issue. I think it ought not to be a partisan issue, which is a far different thing from being a political issue. But what's wrong with it? We want both sides of the political divide. We want both sides of the people, the citizens of St. Lucia, to discuss this issue, because it affects not just one political leaning as opposed to another. It affects everybody. So my thing to that is, why not? Why not make it political?
Laura, you're absolutely correct. And we have to realize, and we must in St. Lucia strive to distance the politics, if you will, or the partisanship approach to any discourse that we have. We must strive to move away from that type of thinking and be factual and matter of fact in St. Lucia. When a young child becomes a burden to society, a burden on our financial resources, it doesn't matter which political party the mother supports or the grandmother supports. That is a burden on the state, and we have to think a little more logically when we deal with this situation. Unfortunately, as has been alluded to many times in St. Lucia, almost everything is politicized. And anything that this government suggests, anything that this Prime Minister suggests, is immediately, almost automatically, a source for an opposing voice. And it is unfortunate, but we have to recognize the fallacy in this sort of approach. And the people of St. Lucia are very well aware of what is right and what is wrong. And the issues, the serious issues that confront us in St. Lucia will not be solved by these automatic and knee-jerk responses just because you do not support the Prime Minister of St. Lucia.
Absolutely. Let me just read here from the same article that I started reading earlier, A Dream Deferred. Adolescent parents commonly view quitting school as a solution to finding the time it takes to raise a baby. Feelings of embarrassment and shame associated with early pregnancy, or especially in St. Lucia, because most kids after they've had a child, they can't go back to school. Well, it used to be that they can't. Now I think they're allowed back, but they opt not to go back to school because of the shame, right? Or difficulty keeping up academically can also drive them to drop out. The popular MTV reality series 16 and Pregnant offers numerous examples of these unfortunate outcomes and serves as a glaring reminder of the need to direct more attention and resources to sex education for teens, as well as programs encouraging teen mothers to stay in school. To my mind, that's an additional burden on the state.
Absolutely.
Because now we don't want these kids out of school. So we have to find other ways to keep them in school, and it may not necessarily be mainstream school because they don't want to go back, because kids can be mean. I had an experience over the weekend with kids being mean, not because they intended to be mean, but just because they're kids.
But notwithstanding some of the noise that has been made about the Prime Minister's statement, we have all discussed these very same issues with underage mothers in St. Lucia, and we have all come to the same conclusion that the Prime Minister has come to. So what we have to do is think forward, think ahead on how we are collectively going to deal with the situation. We have already recognized, it is accepted the world over, that teenage and underage mothers do not and cannot and are not equipped to provide the best care for their children raising children. And if they themselves are not psychologically prepared, if they're not, or they're being psychologically, if you say, developing at that point in their life, how much care and proper attention can they give, even psychological care and upbringing, to their
offspring,
newborn children?
Now, it's interesting that you should say, because the next part of the article talks about harsh parenting. Researchers found that teenage parents are more likely to engage in harsh parenting practices like yelling and spanking, because they are frustrated. They don't have the coping mechanisms. They don't know how to mediate. They don't know how to
That is correct.
take a breather, not within themselves and their peers, much less with a younger child. Having fewer life experiences and coping skills compared to older parents can make it harder to handle the irritability and frustration that sometimes arise when caring for a new baby. Depressive symptoms or persistent stress from other sources can increase these feelings of anger and resentment. Now, unfortunately, I did not cue this video in, but we, over the last week, were inundated with a number of videos of brutalization. Young girls brutalizing each other because of a statement made. They are not psychologically developed enough to deal with a matter and to defend themselves and to discuss something and to engage their peers without getting into fisticuffs.
But we have already agreed in St. Lucia that there is a serious problem with conflict resolution, even among adults. And in this environment now, with the adults not coping with the issues that they face, can you imagine what the younger ones who don't have the experience themselves
Absolutely.
will resort to, especially when they see what's happening with the adults?
Absolutely.
So if we can complain about the behavior and the inability of the adults to cope with the situations, how do we expect these underage girls, underage children to deal with childbirth and raising a child in this environment?
Absolutely. Now just imagine we've been dealing with the parent, but the child grows up. You know, I have a little 1-year-old niece, and she can't speak, obviously, so she verbalizes differently to us. So sometimes she wants to get our attention and she yells, ah, and we go like, no. You know, and we're trying to break her out of that because we recognize that could be detrimental to her socialization. What about those kids who aren't able to do that? They don't have parents or adults around them to break them out of that. So they now grow up with poor socialization skills. They grow up to have relations that are defunct. They you know, they're unable to relate with the opposite sex because maybe what they're seeing at home is always full of conflict. They raise up with self-esteem issues, not being loved, not knowing what it's like to feel the love of a parent, and to always be in this conflicted environment. So when they grow up now, they find themselves falling into that pattern with their partners. And again, over the weekend, there was another video of just that exact same thing. Now, I'm not saying the two people in the video where the man was literally beating the woman and people were just, we were so desensitized there to these kinds of people were just standing there applauding the guy in some instances and not even trying to help the woman. I'm not saying that their parents were young, but I'm saying it could very well be a factor in their upbringing.
Laura, it is very clear that Prime Minister Alan Chastanet has recognized the serious problem in St. Lucia. The government is concerned about it as well. And like he says, we must engage in this discussion. And I think it is important that we continue the discussion to deal with this situation, which is continuing to become a problem into the future. Because the children that are raised now under these conditions are the children of the future.
Now, I really would love to see, you know, my wish for out of all of this is nothing else comes out of it. I would really love to see some sort of debate and discourse on that from both sides of the spectrum, because I think there is so much to this. And I like when politicians in particular make statements and it generates some level of discourse. You may not always agree with the views espoused, but it ought not to be one of ridicule, because I think there's some very real issues at hand there. We're due for a break, but when we come back, there's another issue that I want to deal with that was over the news, trending in the news, still trending in the news actually, and that has to do with the Bannans Bay area rejuvenation renovation project. See you on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to this last leg, this last portion of what's happening now with Laura, before we open the lines to you, our viewers, to join in. I think it was last night I was viewing the news, and I obviously would have heard the comments made by parliamentarian Ernest Healer, Dr. Ernest Healer, about the Bannans Bay renovation or rejuvenation project. And I thought But who does something like that? Who would now, and it's unfortunate that this clip is not cued, but maybe next week we could do a little something and think. I think most persons would remember it was played on television last evening on the news by the major networks anyway. So just bear with me. And it goes something like this. He was complaining that the government had come to his constituency at Barons Bay and were making plans to change the landscape of Barons Bay. And to him, that was not what was perturbing. What was perturbing to him was the fact that the people of Barons Bay were not consulted, and that nobody even thought to consult him as the parliamentary rep for that area, and that even himself, he has a few ideas that I'm assuming that he would like to share, because in his campaign promises on the campaign trail, he had made promises to those persons that he had a plan in mind for them, and it was, it was a little unfortunate, and here's that word again, unfortunate, that the government, in its high-handed manner, did not come to the people and did not come to him as their representative and engage them before implementing any works. What say you on that?
Laura, it is interesting the comments made by Dr. Ernest Hille. He talks about transparency in what the government does, and it's rather ironic that he would make such a statement or an accusation against this government, because this United Workers' Party government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, has been the most transparent and the most open government with information since St. Lucia's independence.
That's a big statement.
That is a big statement. There is more information out there on what the government does, the access to the government by the media, than has ever existed in St. Lucia.
But we have lots of leaks.
Well, I don't know whether you can call something which is public information a leak. Anyway, it's just like someone telling somebody else that, hey, the host on the show tonight, her name is Laura Jean-Pierre. Much of a leak there. However, I think Dr. Ernest Hille himself doesn't have too much currency to argue that the government has no transparency, when he himself has some serious transparency issues relating to the Jafali affair. And there are many unanswered questions relating to that. So Dr. Hille, maybe you could make yourself available to answer a few of these questions. However, time will tell about that. Nevertheless, Laura, the plans for the redevelopment of Castries have existed for quite some time now, at least 10 years.
Is that right?
Since Sir John Compton. And included in these plans was the redevelopment of the Castries Harbour, and that includes the Barons Bay area. The Prime Minister actually mentioned this as well during the inaugural visit of Anthem of the Seas at the newly opened berth number 1 at Point Seraphin, where he stated what the plans were for the Castries Harbour. It would be tourist-oriented cruise ship, and the cargo vessels would now go to, or eventually go to, Cul-de-sac. Dr. Ernest Hille is concerned about the actions of the government at a site visit on the 4th of January, where the Prime Minister, the Mayor of Castries...
Wait, pause. This site visit happened on the 4th of January?
4th of January.
Today is the 23rd of January.
23rd of January, that's correct.
This happened...
Well, a few days, recently. Let's just leave it at that, recently. And that was with the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Mayor of Castries, LASPO officials, and police officials. The overriding concern, and the Prime Minister wanted to get a hands-on or on-the-ground view of exactly what was going on, the overriding concern is the container trailers that are parked along the Banans Bay area up on the hill. And
we've always lamented that
there
that
has
is
been
unsightly.
this has been going
This is
on
the
for
entrance
years.
of our city. This
That is correct.
This is what guests, visitors to our country, to our city, see when they enter
But
from either end.
But what is even more concerning, Laura, is the danger, particularly during the
Absolutely.
night when there is no lighting on these trailers, when there are no reflectors on those trailers, and the pedestrians in that area have to walk along the roadway. If you break down or you don't see any of those trailers, it's very easy to run right into one of them. And what Dr. Ernest Hilaire does not realize, that in the initial plans for that area and what was discussed with the Prime Minister and the other officials was to clear that area of these trailers and to beautify the area. And by extension or directly, it would benefit the very same constituents that he is referring to. Because now they will not have to walk on the road, they could walk on the side. Now the area will not be a looming death trap to motor vehicles. Laura, let me make it abundantly clear. I've discussed this with the Prime Minister, and there are no plans to move anyone from the Banans Bay area without any consultation with those very same residents and all the stakeholders involved, including Dr. Ernest Hilaire, who is the duly elected representative for that area. So all the hullabaloo, as far as I am concerned, is simply designed to make noise and to distract the citizens of this country from the developments that this government is working on arduously, that they were elected to serve the people, and that are coming during the course of this year and into this administration.
Our plans are the plans for this rejuvenation of the Banans Bay area and enhancing of the tourism product where it comes to the cruise ship. And are plans well underway?
Well, plans have been, they have been documented, they have been discussed, and as the Prime Minister has said on numerous occasions, he is, and this government, moving ahead with the plans for Castries, for the harbour, for Vieux Fort, and around the island. In fact, when I was discussing this with him this afternoon, he asked me to share with you and your viewers the plans which were put together in 2008 by Sir John Compton for the redevelopment of the Castries area. And particularly, I have marked out here just 2 pages which I would like to share, which relate to the Castries Harbour and the Banans area. If you look at it on this page here, totally tourist oriented. Cruise ships in Banans Bay, and this is exactly what the plan looks at. I am sure that these drawings and renderings will be made more available to the people of St. Lucia as time goes by.
But we're just now talking about this, so we've already done all those renderings. I mean, the parliamentary rep did say that he had some plans. Are these recent, or how long has the government been working on these plans?
This edition, this is also the cul-de-sac area
that's for the
cargo
vessels.
And the edition of this, all the plans for St. Lucia, is October 2008.
Wow. So that is not, this is during Sir John's
That is correct.
last stint in government.
That is correct. This has been in the works for quite some time, and this current administration, under the leadership of Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, has continued and decided to enhance and work on these plans that were left by Sir John, and this is the intention of the government, to move forward with this, to modernize them as seen fit, and to redevelop St. Lucia into the destination and with the potential that it has.
So one would say, 2008, again, underscoring what Dr. Ernest Hilaire has been saying. No consultation, there are renderings, there's a huge book of, and this book is quite hefty. Has anybody been consulted, gone to, or is this something that is being phased in?
Well, Laura, everything is not going to happen at once.
Obviously.
However, you can have plans, you can have your vision, and when it comes time for the necessary stakeholders to be involved, then they will be involved in the process. It's as simple as that. Everything does not happen at once, and I am quite certain that the persons, the entities, the stakeholders, the agencies, the citizens who have to be involved will be brought on board at the appropriate time.
So what I hear you saying, these are just ideas of, this is just a vision
That
of,
is correct.
of
That is correct.
a previous administration that this administration is going to
That is correct.
hopefully implement, and they're just that. They're just visions, they're ideas, they're renderings
That is
of
correct.
what we want,
That
what the
is
government
correct.
wants,
That-
not what we the people, but what the government wants for us the people.
That is correct.
And that there will be due consultation before
Absolutely.
any of these
Absolutely.
plans are implemented.
What we have to realize is that slowly but surely we can see the pieces of this puzzle being put together. If you look at the extension to booth number 1 at Point Seraphim, and the result of that, only on the 13th of January, 2 Saturdays ago, we had the Anthem of the Seas dock in one of the largest cruise ships ever, Quantum Class. Little things like that, there are times when you can implement measures which do not require too much public input, and there are other times like the Banans Bay and other areas around St. Lucia where you will have to consult with persons who are going to be more directly affected.
You know, I wonder, I know that Dr. Ernest Hilaire said that he had a plan for that area, rejuvenation and whatnot. He wanted to, should his party have taken the helm of control of power in this country, that I wonder if he would have implemented some of those plans in this book.
well-
and if in the next 4 years that they were to come get back into power, if they would continue, because there seems to be this disconnect, and all administrations have done it in the past, that because it wasn't their brainchild, they would not continue.
Well, what I can tell you, Laura, is the plans that Dr. Ernest Hilaire says that he has or had, they're his plans. If he had gotten into office, or if his party had won the elections, he and most likely his government would have implemented these plans. Well, the UWP had their plans. They got elected into office, and now they will implement those plans as the people wanted them to do.
Do you think, I'm just going to ask you here for your personal opinion now, because I don't know that, I mean, you can't speak to what other people are thinking, but do you think that this book was the previous administration was aware of this book? Because you said this is a 2008 edition
That is
of
correct.
this.
That is correct.
So that means it spanned 2 administrations
That is correct.
before your
Absolutely
own.
correct.
So in the previous administration, this would have been around. Was it
Yes.
hidden somewhere? Was it in a vault somewhere? Was it the private property of the party, of the United Workers' Party, or was it in government, in the hallowed walls?
Well, Laura, I think when these plans were made way back when, there was much public awareness. As far as I recall, and I have been informed, that there was actually an exhibition at the town hall in Castries with renderings, whether it would be models or pictures, as we see here, of what the government plans were at that time.
I quite like the idea of that cleaning up of the whole Banans area, because it's a place that I don't frequent, but I see potential in it. I see a lot of danger in it currently. How soon do you think that these plans may come underway, or at least the consultation process?
Well, Laura, I'm not in a position to tell you exactly what phase 2 is going to be.
Right.
But what I can tell you about phase 1 for the Banans Bay area is that the cleanup of these trailers will happen shortly.
But you see, that's the thing about the cleanup. We've had cleanups before,
Yes.
but the trailers are back.
Well,
How are we going to police that they never come back?
Well, the nitty-gritty of that I won't be able to tell you right now. But what I can say is that the Prime Minister and the Mayor of the city of Castries are resolute that this will be handled and dealt with once and for all. And one thing that I must say, notwithstanding the blueprints and the plans that we have in here, part of the cleanup of the city has to do with the policing or the dealing with the human element within the city of Castries. And I don't think that there's anyone who can refute that the mayor of the city of Castries is doing a wonderful job, and we are moving along those lines as well. So the people will be prepared. There has been complaints of the city being a dump, of being dusty, of being stray dog and rat infested, and these issues are being dealt with by the mayor of the city of Castries, and I think everyone has alluded to the work that he's doing and have accepted that the mayor of the city of Castries is doing a tremendous job with his staff down in town.
I couldn't agree more with you on that, actually, because I think I don't recall when last we had a mayor of Castries that we all knew.
That is correct.
Who that person is. We can recall their name off the top of our heads and see tangible proof of work that the mayor is enacting. So I think kudos to the mayor of Castries.
Well, let me just say something here regarding the mayor, and I think he deserves all the kudos, and we need to be made aware of a number of issues that have existed for a very long time in the city. For example, we have this syndrome in St. Lucia. I don't know where it started, but it has been perpetuated over and over again. And it is what I refer to as the Malewe syndrome. Like, this man have to make a bread, everybody have to eat, and as if that is an excuse for everything déclassé, for everything to be done for the lowest common denominator, with no style, with no standards, nothing at all. We had this situation, it still exists to a certain extent, of the street vendors, the tea tray mentality that we have throughout the city. And what a lot of people don't know is that the Ave Maria School failed its fire safety inspections 16 years in a row because of those trays on the sidewalks. No authority felt the need or the urgency to clean up those vendors, and the reason for the failure was because the trays would have impeded a speedy evacuation in the case of an emergency. Everyone knows, some time ago, anytime, walking along Mikul Street, Brazil Street, that the school children would be walking on the road because there's hardly enough room after school is let go for them to walk on the sidewalks.
I wonder whether Mr. Julian Monrose, president of the St. Lucia Teachers Union, knows about this situation.
But let me go on.
Because it's not just a hazard to the children, but the teachers that he represents as well.
But hold on. Last year, for the first time in 16 years, after this mayor took up office, the Ave Maria School passed.
Are you kidding
Yes,
me?
Absolutely.
Wow. 16 years failing the fire
That is correct.
safety.
And nobody was resolute enough to do something about it.
And for the
until
first time last year,
Yes.
the Ave Maria passed.
That is correct.
After 16 years.
16 failures.
Wow. If nothing else, that is amazing. That is amazing. Now, I don't know, I cannot vouch for the veracity of it, but I had also heard that during the cleanup, that a number of paraphernalia associated with drugs were found in the cleanup of those seats. And for me, we have children. This whole block houses two of the main schools in St. Lucia, never mind the city. And we have those kinds of things within easy reach, within easy access of those children. And I wonder whether those persons who are making all those noises, I'm not saying that they ought not to make noises if they feel that somebody has slighted them, belittled them, ridiculed them. But let's have a holistic approach to this. The lines are now open. You can give us a call and share your views with us at 4519788. You can send us your WhatsApp messages at 284-6536 or send us your emails at laurajapier@gmail.com. And we have our very first caller. Hello, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Good night, Laura.
Good night.
Yes. On your last point about the Ave Maria School, I'm a parent, and I've gone to several PTA meetings there, and that was a troubling subject. When I saw the vendors removed from that thing, I said, look, a good job. Because it was time that thing get out of there. And the walls, I realized the walls, I passed there some time ago and the guys were plastering the walls. And I tell him, man, those walls look like 1,000,000 years old. And that facelift in the city, the whole block has just changed because of that. And that's an amazing job done by the mayor.
Absolutely.
But I want to jump onto the statements by the PM. That affected Miss Laura Japier so much. But let me tell you something. That's a subject that we have to discuss, and that's what the Prime Minister was saying. And I like the Prime Minister because he's going where most politicians will not go. Politicians will avoid those areas because it's not a vote-catching subject.
Absolutely.
And I like the fact that the Prime Minister is prepared to take some blows for what he believes in and what everybody knows in St. Lucia. You see, we are kind of Suse kind of people, you know. We know the problem with teenage pregnancy. And Laura Japier speaks out of turn. She doesn't take Catherine Philly, sorry, Laura. Sorry.
I
She
understand.
does not take her time to understand easy subjects, to analyze it. She just rattles like an old train. You know, without understanding.
Let's try not to go down.
You know,
those,
she's all.
Caller, we have trains in St. Lucia. Well, there's a train for the tourists on the road.
Yeah, it doesn't rattle though.
It doesn't rattle.
But she's taking a serious subject and she's making a clown of herself. If she just listens to what our child is free to a democratic right to have children. She doesn't realize a 16-year-old doesn't have a right to.
Okay, I think we lost this caller.
I mean, she should take her time and just analyze things before she speaks. But great show.
Thank you.
I'm listening.
Thank you. But I think, in all fairness, I think Catherine's heart is in the right place. I think Catherine really cares about the women and children that she advocates for. We just have to agree to disagree on this particular topic because I think it's absolutely abhorrent that we allow those kinds of things to continue. We have our second caller online. Good
Hi,
evening,
good
you're on the
night.
air. Good night.
Good night, caller.
Do you know you were a jackass, Laura?
Thank you. So are you. Many happy returns. So moving right along. You know, and these are the kinds of things. That's the kind of behavior
serious
we're having a discourse. I just said we can agree to disagree, and this is the kind of response. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. What's on your mind?
Good evening. This is the chairperson for Central Car Street for the United Workers' Party. And I'd like to say bravo to our current mayor for a fantastic job that he's doing alongside with Honorable Sarah Fraud Bobre. It is a really great transformation of the city. It is sad that politics plays such of a great role in basically what we as solutions know that we deserve. We deserve that our city be brought back to a certain level where tourists could enjoy the benefits of our city and they could feel secure. They could, basically spend and basically generate some money in the economy. And that's what we need to do in Central Castries and the city on a whole. So when politics plays such of a part that basically would affect a decision as in to move trailers by the side of the road, which we all know that is an eyesore. This is really sad. This is a sad day for us here in St. Lucia. politics has just been decaying our society, and we need to step up. We need to, as St. Lucians, know that we deserve better, and this is our opportunity for us to put our foot down and say, hey, the mayor is doing something good. We know in St. Lucia, we know in Castries, we need to really fix up the city. Let us go ahead and do it. Let us join hands together. No man is an island. One person cannot do it alone. So again, I say kudos to the mayor. I say good night to you, Norbert. My apologies for not even greeting you. But bravo again to the mayor and the team at the Castries City Council.
Thank you so much for calling and for sharing. And you know, one of the things that I've always said is that if you have a city that looks like a dump, you will get all the things that are associated with a dump.
That's absolutely
You know?
correct.
We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hello, good night, Laura.
Hi, good night.
I just want to say something about the last call. Another female, the one before her, that spoke about the Prime Minister. He liked the idea, I think, about restricting women to one child.
I don't think the Prime Minister said he's restricting a woman to one child. He's talking about a specific situation where a woman cannot afford, or she's a young. You understand?
Right,
yes.
Yeah. I understand.
So no, because I think I'm taking offense because I think I can afford to have 3-4 children if I want to, and I don't think the Prime Minister. You understand what I'm saying? So let's just get it right.
Laura, are you listening? Can I?
I am listening, but you need to no. So you don't need to cut me off to share. You need to correct yourself, right? You need to correct yourself.
Okay,
so go ahead, moving along.
Because I'm aware that's what he said.
Yes, moving along. Yes,
Maybe I start my conversation wrong, but anyway.
Yes,
whether the person is able to or not able to, right? Okay, but let's say not able to, because that's what he said, right? That child, do you think if the Prime Minister decide that they put in a program to remove these children from these supposedly unable parents, right, to probably what, able people or what, foster cares or what is it really? Is the government will be the ones responsible for funding? Will the government be the ones responsible for funding these people? Why don't the government see it? Why don't the Prime Minister see it as a situation where, okay, maybe they should have something like a welfare program where parents or young teenagers who are unable to, you will get that. You will find.
Do you know? Hold on, sir. Let's engage each other. Are you aware of the challenges and the implications and the spin-offs of the welfare program in those countries that have a welfare program?
Yeah, it
is almost a certainty that once you get on welfare, you never get off welfare. That's
not true.
It is almost a guarantee when you get on welfare that you do not get off welfare.
That is not
true.
That is
now,
not facts.
Can we afford as a country a welfare program where
I think we can.
Whereas we can we have citizens of this country who want to adopt, because that was one of the first options that he gave, who want to adopt, who do not have children, who can afford all of the nurturing, the caring, the education and all of that, who want to adopt. You pay for it, I pay for it, or a person who is able or a family who is able pay for it.
Laura,
think about
what would be the best place for that child? Is it where the parent? Come on, you and I both know. Okay, you're trying to be contradictory. All right. We could all agree. Yes, maybe the person is unfit financially, but caring. Literally, we've seen many times the lengths young people, young mothers have gone to take care of their children. And yes, maybe the reasons why some of them fall short because they're not in a good place. But what do we do as a people, as a society? We help eradicate that, not by taking away these children,
I don't
But by
think. I
being
don't think. I
able
think when I
to
listen to
assist,
what
and
the
this
Prime
is the
Minister
problem.
is
Listen
saying,
to what I'm saying.
I think when I listen
Being
to what the
able
Prime
to
Minister is
assist,
saying,
and we
I
do
don't
not
think
have
that the
that-
Prime
we do
Minister
not
is
have that
saying.
mentality
I
of
don't think that the Prime
assisting.
Minister is saying to
We
take away
believe
children
that
from a
persons who do
home
not
that
have
he's capable.
is just not
He is
part
talking
of the
about
is
those
not part
homes,
of the
those people
society.
who are
When
unable, not
government
just
not even
financially,
making it
but
liable for
mentally,
people to
and,
be able to
and
have.
they aren't able to nurture these
but
children.
call-
These are the people that he's talking about.
But caller, what the Prime Minister has said is that there needs to be a discussion, and we need to
No,
come up
okay,
with
I agree with
solutions.
discussion.
Right.
But honestly, being the first rule that, okay, I can agree if the parent is willing to allow the child to go to a foster home or
But caller,
But that's what he's talking
or be
about.
Caller, you
adopted.
will accept
If
that.
the parent is willing, if the parent is willing.
No, but
But
caller, you
if-
will accept that
But
social
you cannot,
services.
the government or no government, no minister should make it. I'm not saying he said that already, but if that's the place he's going, that one should be off the table.
But caller-
Thank you so
where a
thank-
minister where the government takes away your child, whether you want to or not, just because you're unable to care for that child financially.
Thanks for calling and thanks for sharing. We have other calls online. Thanks for, but we already do that. Just
social
to put that
services
point in
already
there. We already do
evaluates
that.
the situation in the home and determines, based on the guidelines that they have,
Right.
whether the parents can, or the mother or whoever
Is
is
fit,
taking, is
not
fit.
just financially.
Exactly.
We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hello, good night, Laura.
Good night.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
No, but how are you doing?
Hi, good evening.
Good night. Yeah, I was listening to the last caller. I wasn't going to call her, but listening to the last caller, I am thinking, what's about the rights of that little baby? What's about the right of that child? Because when you have a 13-year-old or 14-year-old raising a baby, that person is not emotionally ready, financially, not emotionally ready to raise a child. So when you give them just because they want to raise a doll, then what happens to the child? The child is exposed to neglect,
That's correct.
physical abuse, sexual abuse, all these kinds of abuses.
And that's the thing, caller. I think a lot of the caller, a lot of the naysayers, especially that particular caller, is missing. I think he's missing. He's alluding and he's trying to persuade people that the Prime Minister or any sane person for that matter would just come in.
drag
You're
your child
you're 16. You have a child. I'm going to take that child, dragging that child from a loving home where that home is fit to raise that child. And we're saying a home, not just a person, as opposed to a 13-year-old child who has a child already, who is probably pregnant with her second child, who's unable, the squalor that these children live in, and just leave that child there, because guess what? The best place for that child is with its mother. Bollocks is what I say. Because we do it already.
Yes, and Laura, we're going to be faced with problems from that
That
baby,
is correct.
from
That
the
is
baby's
correct.
mother.
Absolutely.
And even the child who is raising the child
That's
will not
right.
even be able to continue her normal life, like her education,
That
or
is
whatever, so that
Absolutely.
she can have a proper future.
Absolutely.
So we have to think of all this.
And these children, I call them children because that's what they are, even though they have born children themselves, they become desperate, they're frustrated. A lot of the times the backstory is not the bed of roses that everybody seems to want to paint.
Yes,
that the parents now have cast them aside because what? You're useless. You don't have an education. You can't provide for the home. You can't go out there and work because you're still a minor. And these children have to fend for themselves.
Yes, and Laura, even the fact of them having so many babies after is because they have to sleep with other people so that they can be
Exactly,
able
to
to
care
raise that
right,
child.
and they
So
fall
it's like
prey
a
to these
vicious cycle
predators.
that we need to stop.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay,
thank you so much for sharing. And that this caller has eloquently put it. Those are the people. Those are the situations that, to my mind, I could be wrong, but to my mind, those are the situations that the Prime Minister is looking at, not those well-adjusted
That is correct.
homes. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hello, good evening, Laura.
Hi, good evening. You're on
I
the
won't
air.
even go as far as saying the Prime Minister didn't even go far enough. It's not even a case of children or underage minors. There are grown individuals in this society who cannot raise children. And it is so bad that it's as if we need a program to teach people how to raise children. You know, it has come to that point in this country that persons do not know how to correct their children, don't know how to raise their children, don't know how to do to have their children at a path or at a level that they would be able to go into society and be productive individuals.
Absolutely.
So it's not even only about the children who are making children. There are grown adults who cannot raise children properly. You understand? Who are having 5, 6, 7, and they cannot raise those children properly. They cannot first afford to have those children. So again, like the previous caller said, they go to have different men to take care of these children, and then have other children for these men, and it's just a cycle. You understand?
Cycle.
And they don't know how to teach these children manners. They don't know how to teach these children to be products of society that we can be proud of. They themselves they don't even know anything themselves, so they're just making the society worse off. You understand? And I believe at that point the state has to come in and say, you know what? At some point you need to stop.
Absolutely.
You need to stop at some
Absolutely.
point. You understand?
Absolutely.
And to even bring it further now, I have always thought of, there should be a social program in place for those persons who find themselves being imprisoned, you understand, for these children. You understand? Some sort of program that could help them out, because there is an emotional situation which generates having your parent or one of your parents in prison or even dead, you understand, shot on the road, shot by the police, and so many different things. To me, the state should be involved in those children's lives, because we have to understand that these people are human beings. They are growing, they are learning, they are taking in all kind of information. Absolutely. And it is really important that we get involved as a people.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thank you so much for calling and sharing. Now the caller who was going off on a tangent and talking about welfare and whatever, and he one of the biggest problems with the welfare thing is that of abuse.
That is correct.
We have another call online. You're on the air. Hello.
Good evening, Miss Laura.
Good evening, sir.
And also good night to your
Mr. Williams.
To your what's his name? The gentleman next to you.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
One of the things, I listened to the Prime Minister when he was on team and he was making that statement actually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think he was actually saying that you should take away the child from the parents. Well, in fact, when Tim asked him the question, he said, well, if you have a first one in that instance, in that condition,
qualified it, yes,
and then a second one come through also, then there should be put some sort of measure in place.
An intervention, yes.
Or, like to probably, well, he was looking at probably, probably taking away the child from the parents, if maybe there were some people who willing to adopt the child and whatever.
Absolutely.
But so much in saying all of that, I still see that we have a lot of problems plaguing our society.
Talk to me.
And I don't really think we as a nation or as a state, as a society, we are ready to really help people who are in those conditions. Because if we go island-wide, maybe it would be very surprising to see something in the state and the condition that some people are living in.
Absolutely.
And they are living under. And what are we really doing about it as a state? Is it we come, okay, for instance, you have a nice talk show. We have many others who have all of those talk shows. But yet still, when I look around, I still see the same problem keeps, amounting. Instead of it decrease, more problems are being added to it all the time. What are we doing as a society about it? It's not a one-person problem. It's not a one-person help. It takes everybody. You have people who are maybe they are multimillionaires. They are millionaires all around in the States. Are they willing to help? Are they looking in those directions? Is it an option for them? Perhaps sometimes they probably just look at those people just as creatures, just as it's like a roach, a cockroach, and I don't study them. But I really think as a state we have to take this thing into consideration holistically. Stakeholders and others, everybody, be it church, be it whoever we are, everybody is supposed to come together and to try and solve those problems.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
which suggests that as a nation together, I think we have a lot of problems plaguing our society, and we need to work together. I think the time has come where we should put politics on a side. Because that
I don't necessarily think politics need to be on a side. I think it's the nature of the politics that we participate in. I think it's the partisan politics that is where the problem is, not the politics in and of itself. But I must say thank you for calling, because we're running quickly out of time.
Okay.
But valid points nonetheless. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Now, one of the things that this caller mentioned that struck me, and I said, yes, remember Madonna and the children that she adopted? Remember Angelina Jolie and the children that she adopted from Malawi? You know, those are all options, giving children a better lease on life. Correct. We have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Hi,
Laura,
good evening.
And good evening to your guest.
Good evening, ma'am.
Sometimes I wonder if we, St. Lucians, does not pass by the homes where they have the children to see the amount of kids there with no parents, raising by the state. Whether they're not thinking, well, when a 13, 14, 15-year-old, even 16, have a kid and you can't take care of that kid, where would that child end up? Is more kids growing up without no parental guidance, no health care, no nothing to really help them. They're just on the street doing what they want.
Absolutely. And you pass around by the fast food joints and they're all, can you buy me something? Can you know? And
yeah.
I may have misunderstood the Prime Minister, but what I hear him saying is that is there a better option? Can we not have this? And not just pooling this, because I hear people talking as if, you know, they're just coming into these homes and arresting these children and dragging, kicking. I want to be with my mommy. I want to be with my daddy. I'm pulling them away. You know, it is a case where these
our problem in St. Lucia, we do not listen. We do not take our time to listen. We fast to talk and we do not listen. But I find that point is good, because I'm seeing too many kids with babies that they cannot take care of. They would leave them babies in the house and go out to lime at night. What you expect would happen to that child? You come home, maybe the house burned down and the child is dead. Then everybody saying, oh, government pas mette lame. Now government can try mette lame. They have a problem with it. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, you too. The older folks have a saying, wash atevely or glow atevely, you know. And this is what it is, you know. You damned if you don't, damned if you don't. But one of the things I like about, in particular, this incident is the discourse that has surrounded it. People are giving their views, their opinions. I may not agree with them. They may not agree with me or with mine. But the point is, we are talking and we are bringing it to light, the issues of teenage pregnancy, which is very rife, is still very rife in St. Lucia, unfit homes, you know, and not just teenage mothers. There are, like one of the callers said, parents, adults who are unable, and they have a trailer load of children.
But this is exactly what the Prime Minister said, and this is exactly what he wanted to happen. A discussion, as he said, about this particular issue, and this is what we're having right now. The Prime Minister has a great deal of empathy for single mothers and mothers who are struggling to raise their children. But he also recognizes that if the state is facilitating that, and then it's becoming a burden on the state, that we have to look at other options. And nobody is saying, as you said earlier, to pull your children out, drag them out, kicking and screaming. But we have to look at a number of the other options. As the Prime Minister said again, maybe adoption, maybe another relative could take that child, a cousin, as has been done.
And that's the thing, we're deliberately not hearing the adoption part, which is, if I adopt a child, the burden or the onus is on me to raise that child as my own, to take care of that. That is not a burden placed on the state. That is a burden or a responsibility placed on a family or a person in society.
When we look at this, Laura, with a word that we like to use nowadays, holistically, it's a win-win situation.
Win-win
for
situation.
everyone.
Absolutely. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Good night, Laura.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. William.
Good night, sir.
Good night, Laura.
You are listening to yourself on the television. You need to lower the volume of your television and listen through your earphone, because I can hear there's a playback. Is he still there?
Hello.
Yes. Good night.
Yeah. Concerning the Bannon Bay situation, I'm saying it's not just 10 years, it's more than that. Because it's much more than that, that this development had to go through. I have attended meeting with representative from Port Authority, Mr. Satney, some of the residents in Bannon who had trees, crop planted there, were compensated. And they promised the fisher folks that they would take us down to Asalupui for the development. But government changed and it never took place. So it's nothing new that both governments that has been in power knows about it. So we are just a group of people who do not love to see progress. For our political reason, we are trying our best to obstruct any progress in this little island. It's about 16 months that this government in power, and all government buildings, all government schools, all government police station, all the hospitals is one person many of us blaming for. Shastney. I wonder if it's the new Jesus Christ that can solve all problems within 16 months in office. Thank you, Laura. May God bless you all.
Thank you so much for calling. But sometimes we have to understand that when you take public office, especially the highest office in the land, that comes part and parcel of the territory.
Absolutely.
Part and parcel of the territory. This is our final caller. Good evening.
Hello.
You're on the air. Hello.
Good evening to you both.
Yes, good evening.
You know what we have in Central right now? A lot of spin bearers.
A lot of what, sorry?
Spin bearers.
Spin bearers.
Everything Alan Shastney says, they take it and they spin it. Now, as much as you, Laura, said that, what's her name? Catherine Seals has people's interests at heart. But Catherine Seals is playing a lot of politics with that, how they call it? Raise your voice. You understand? Because Catherine Seals has her own agendas too, involved in all the interests she has for St. Lucians. You understand where I'm coming from? Now, if Mr. Shastney wasn't making any comments about anything, they would say, oh, the Prime Minister's not saying anything. The teachers union is another thing again. The hospitals, the education system. It's not only a year and how many months that this government is in power, these things have been happening. The schools didn't get in that mess in less than a year and some months. This has been happening for a while. Everybody was dumb. All of a sudden now, everybody have groups there. Everybody's concerned citizen. You know, they're criticizing everything. If Alan Shastney is a man I'm so fussy about, you know. You understand? But if Alan Shastney bring down God from heaven, they will criticize. You know, and if politics destroying everything in St. Lucia now, let the government do what they have to do, give them a chance. You understand what I'm saying? You understand? And all this politics just have us divided and hated. And they're talking about the crime happening in St. Lucia, but they are the ones who causing it, because when you hear ministers come and say about there will be no peace there, and they are the ones saying this and that, what they put in the people's head, that's why now they want to burn this and burn that. You know, it's just, I am so sick and tired of these politicians in particular, and some of us are so stupid that we're letting the politicians fool us and have us in this mess. You understand? Politicians come and go, but our little island's still there. They're talking about we in that blacklist. It's not because Alan Shastney is there we got in the blacklist. When you look at all the bad publicity that the opposition putting us in all overseas, we on the internet now, everything that happens in Russia goes overseas. You understand? And this needs to stop. The politicians need to think of St. Lucia first. Don't think of their greediness because they're not in power, and then because they're not in power, they want to destroy St. Lucia. They're not destroying Alan Chastney, our beautiful island. They're destroying. Alan Chastney leaving us and leaving us in the mess when he ready to leave politics, and we in the mess for what? Through greediness of politicians. Good evening.
Thank you so much for your contribution. But I just want to say that, we all have an agenda. I have an agenda being here. You have an agenda being here. We all have agendas. And I'm certain Catherine has an agenda. Of course, she must have an agenda. Otherwise, why is she doing what she's doing? So I have a problem with people shooting the messenger and not focusing on the message. Now, she has taken a different stance from yourself or myself. But again, I think, I honestly believe that she has the best interest of the women and children that she advocates for at heart. And I will stand by that statement. Now, we've run out of time and then some. What are your final words to our people?
Well, Laura, to the people of
But
St. Lucia.
before you say your final words, I just want to ask one question. That question is burning in my mind because I think you are the face of that. What is happening with the sex offenders registry?
Well, as we heard a few weeks ago, Laura, the government has decided that it is going to move forward with the establishment of a sex offender registry that will be taken to cabinet for more discussions, and pretty soon will be forwarded to the Attorney General for the drafting of the relevant laws, and an announcement will be made to the people of St. Lucia. We know that that process takes a little time, so don't expect something next week. But since I had been at the forefront, or one of those at the forefront of that discussion, what I can tell you is that I've leveraged the position that I am in now to discuss with the government, the Prime Minister and the other government ministers, and I can say clearly to St. Lucia that every single one of the government ministers supports the sex offender registry.
Likewise, Catherine Sillis,
That's
just to put it out there, that we all have the things that we agree with and the things that we don't agree with in everybody. So, final words from you.
What I would like to say in the context of this whole discussion and everything else that is happening in St. Lucia is that this government was elected into office to fulfill the promises that they made to the people of St. Lucia on the campaign trail. And this Prime Minister, Alan Chastney, and his team of ministers is dedicated to fulfilling those promises, and that the government was elected to serve for 5 years. The government's plans and its ambitions for the people of St. Lucia will be borne out during these 5 years and beyond, because St. Lucia does not stop after 5 years.
Absolutely. For me particularly, I want to thank you for being here. This is the kind of discourse, kind of open, frank discussion that I like to have. And as you can tell, some of our viewers don't necessarily agree with the position of the government and the position that I support as well. So I support the government in this regard. And maybe next week I may not be agreeing with the government's or the Prime Minister's pronouncements, and I will have somebody else who will side with me and to shed light on that. We'll have another discourse, but that is what it's supposed to be. There's supposed to be open and frank discourse without fear of recriminations, and anybody can use this platform
The
to air
discussions
respectfully. Absolutely. And this is where we end. But before we go, I want to remind St. Lucians of Talent 758. This is a project that is very close and dear to me. And they're moving into the semifinals of the leg of that competition, Talent 758, providing a platform for young persons in particular who have a talent to show that talent. So the semifinals is this Saturday, the 27th of January. It starts at 7 p.m. I'm hoping sharp at the Mon Kubaril Estate in Soufrière. So if you haven't gotten a ticket, and I know they're flying fast and furious, you need to get a ticket and you need to come down to Soufrière at the Mon Kubaril Estate. The ticket only costs $25 per adult, and I know from Labrie we have at least 50 people already signed up to come down to Soufrière to view and to take in the talent of St. Lucia. So if you're not there, you're square. Again, this is where we come to the end of our show. We're going beyond the spin, beyond the smiles, bringing to you the stories that nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to hear. Until next week, goodbye.